been drafted into a company and they say, look, we just need you to be the ESG advocate for this. We need you to sell everyone on ESG. That's your task. And you're going into the office one day and the lift pulls open and you step into the lift and then this grumpy guy jumps into the lift and he looks at you and he's the CEO and he's obviously not in a particularly good mood and he stares at you and says, oh, well, this ESG rubbish convinced me that we need ESG, and he presses the button and the lift's going to the 9th floor. So what do you say to him?
I could sum that up in one sentence. What do you think happens to your job if all your institutional investors sell your stock? And that's it. What happens if investors just turn around and no longer want to invest in your company because you're not conforming to ESG? Because that may well happen. It may well happen sooner than we think.
I think I would stress that there is very significant evidence that better ESG performance creates tangible business value for both shareholders and other stakeholders. So it's measurable, the impact that it has, the positive impact. It reduces the business risks. This is also measurable, and it is a source. Proactive sustainability management is a very large source for new to identify new opportunities for value creation. And if he is not, so it's risk mitigation and new opportunity identification with tangible business value. And if he is not convinced yet, I can also show him that there is a lot of legislation going in this direction. So he will be forced by his financiers or so the people that fund his business in the future, banks and insurance companies. So he will be forced by them and by the legislator to take, and by the public, the NGOs, to take action. So even if he doesn't see the business case himself, he will be forced. There is no other way out. And then thirdly, first movers have an advantage. So if don't wait too long, start now with defining your strategy and seeing where you want to play and whether you want to be best in class or somewhere in the middle.
We now know by evidence through reports and research that many of the more high profile ESG companies, but also larger funds with a good ESG rating actually performs really, really well. They very often, if not at all points, outperform their peers. So by being ESG conscious, we can actually have also a shareholder value. But besides shareholder value, so if we focus on shareholder value, we will also get environmental and social impact, right? And what you, Mr. CEO, may not know is that your organization is very loyal and very interested in sustainability. We actually know that 70% of employees in Europe wants to contribute to sustainability, wants to contribute to sustainable business through their roles and through their mandate and responsibilities. So by actually inviting them to play a part, we can boost our employee engagement. So we can get the shareholder value contribution, we can get the external impacts, we can get a hold of the potential of our organization's employee engagement, and that will also accelerate the operational and financial performance, which, I mean, it's a win-win, right?
And just then you hear this voice, and everyone's sort of saying, "Oh, hello, sir," and everyone's sort of looking all nervous. It's the CEO, and he said, "Oh, hold the lift," and he jumps into the lift, and he looks at you, and he says, "Feelings? Explain to me why I should be worrying about that."
Why feelings? I would say, well, two reasons. One is they're the richest source of data you have in your organization to keep everyone well as a starting point, mentally and physically well, and they are the richest source of performance data. As data, moods and emotions are your greatest predictor of how well your people are and how well they're going to perform in the near and long term. It's as simple as that. It's data that we don't know how to interpret, we tend to ignore as organizations, but that can be captured very simply. And as I say, tell us, you could even report to your shareholders on how your people feel and where the trajectory is in terms of the journey of their moods and emotions. And it's not fluff. We're talking about hard data here.
You're in this company and you're the advocate for ESG, and you walk into the building and the lift opens and you step into the lift and you hear this cheerful voice walking along in the foyer and say, "Morning, George, how's your family?" And then he's got the big grin on his face and he steps into the lift and he's the CEO, okay? And he says, "You're the ESG guy." He said, "I think ESG is a great idea." He said, "But you know what? Where do we start? Can you give me three pieces of advice?" What would you say to him?
Yeah, I mean, I can probably it's easier to give 15 pieces of advice. I think the first thing is understand that it's not going to go away. I mean, ESG is here for the long term. It's a different way of running businesses. It's fully ingrained into the way we're going to regulate businesses, and it's only going to get the focus on ESG is only going to increase. So we have to bear that in mind. I think one of the things that we have to do as ESG advocates, and I'm an analyst, so I like sitting on the fence and just talking about other people. So I tend not to, although personally I might be a fan of renewable energy, as an analyst, as you've heard me talk previously, talking about how oil and gas actually, we owe an awful lot to the oil and gas industry. If you're an ESG advocate, you have to show and prove that ESG can have a long-term positive impact to the health of an organization, be that through just making it better, making your staff more loyal, right through to an investor perspective, making sure those business owners want to invest in your organization for the long term. And I think the third one would be, being strategic about the partners that you go out and help you achieve your sustainability goals with. I'm going to add a fourth. This is bad.
Go ahead.
But it's understanding what's important as well for your organization. As a CEO, you probably have a good understanding on actually where is your gender pay gap? Do you have women in senior management? Are you doing enough to be inclusive? From just purely from that social aspect, are you recruiting people from different backgrounds than rather than just going to the milk round and getting the cleverest kids from the top universities? What about that raw talent that maybe hasn't done so well in the education system, largely because they were going to school hungry and their school was a failing school, right? So it's kind of taking this holistic approach, understanding that the ESG, I mean, I've built an ESG framework. It's incredibly complex. There are so many elements to an ESG framework, which is sort of what's important. What's important for this company, understanding where can have the biggest impact in terms of mitigating long-term risk. It might be in terms of, who we recruit and making this a better organization that's more inclusive. It might be about energy and environmental impact. And that has to be tackled first. I guess that ties back to who your key partners are. You need to, I mean, if you're an investor, for example, you need to really understand what sits under the hood of each of these different rating agencies' ratings, and you know, obviously institutional investors will have a good handle on that, and most of them apply their own frameworks to assess. But it's kind of, you know, as a company, you need to know which rating agencies you want to engage with, because there are so many out there, so many asking companies to collaborate with them, to disclose more information. You can't do it all. So where do you start?
Don't wait. At least, you know, do the business case, do the math, and find out how you want to position and what your sustainability strategy is. And even if you say, I'm trailing edge, I don't do a lot, I want to follow it, I'm not the first mover, it's fine, but at least think of it carefully. Spend time on it, because it can be a game changer in your industry. Second would be think long term, but also backcast it into short-term discrete targets. Otherwise, you're never going to speed up fast enough. So you really need to break it down into, you know, steps that are actionable and that you can sell also internally into your to your company and ecosystem. And I think that latter word, ecosystem, relates to a third recommendation. You cannot do it alone. You have to work in ecosystems. So make sure you define who are in my ecosystems for each of the products. What are the value chains? It's not necessarily a linear value chain anymore, like in the past, but these are also circular economies, you know, require different ecosystems. There might be IT firms, a lot of different firms might be involved. So define the ecosystem, see what role do you want to play in that ecosystem, find that out. What is the joint business model and the value pool in that ecosystem? So, and try to find yourself back into what do you want to do to contribute to that system? And how is this ecosystem, what kind of standards are they applying, and how do you create a common language within that ecosystem? I think those things you should start to work on rapidly, and that while at the same time becoming more and more transparent to all stakeholders.
Yes, so I think we come back to the ESG by design. I think we need to start with the products and services that we're providing. Look at how they're designed, and what are the content and how are they produced? How can we make products that we sell to our market more sustainable? But we also need to learn from our sector. So where do we operate as a company? What issues do our sector have? There are lots of information out there to grasp on sector-specific ESG matters. We also need to talk and have a dialogue with other stakeholders, but it's really to find those material pain points and issues that we need to address that is relevant for the sector that we operate within. So not to be fooled by low-hanging fruit, really challenge and find solutions to the problem that is relevant in our industry. And last, we also need to understand, if we know what we should do, we also need to do it at an appropriate scale. So we need to choose initiatives and bring them to the scale that they require, rather than picking initiatives because they're appealing, it makes good PR, communication, and so quite often we also just scratch the surface and we don't bring it to the scale that our total footprint would require. It's about products, it's about sector-specific material issues, and it's about scale.
Every single individual in the organization needs greater agency over their own health. They can very easily achieve. So they need awareness, they need self-awareness, they need education in that regard. And then they need to be trusted to be able to look after themselves, input in a constructive way. And we need leadership and management to be able to know and feel confident about creating the right environment that people can take greater agency over their own health and well-being. And an example of that, taking it back to the start of our conversation, might be treat an individual as an individual, listen to their circumstances. Every single individual is different. Trust them that no matter the working environment, as we've all experienced in the last 2 years, when people work at home, if that's where they are at their best, let them work at home. If you sense that they need to be included in the social group, bring them in.